Okay, sixth graders, we're going to go on to lesson 1.9, which is about properties of numbers and properties of operations. Properties are just like rules, okay? They're rules that you can use to take advantage of the problem. Kind of like if you know and understand the rules of a game, then you're a better player, because you can use those rules to your advantage. And that's what we're doing with properties of numbers. We're using these properties so that we can use those properties to help us solve problems easier. So, that's what this is about. It's rules of math. Okay? Properties of numbers. The first one we'll talk about is called the commutative property. The commutative property works for both multiplication and for addition. So, whenever you're doing multiplication or addition, if you understand the commutative property, it might help you solve it. And the commutative property says that you can take the numbers and you could switch the order of the numbers and get the same answer. So, for example, 5 plus 8 is the same as 8 plus 5. 7 times 5 is the same as 5 times 7. You can get the same answer by switching the numbers around. Okay? Then, the associative property for addition and multiplication again. And that is a little bit like the commutative property, but sometimes it's you get these confused because rather than switching the order of the numbers, we're switching the order in which we perform the operation. So look at this example. This is 3 plus 4 plus 7. If you have 3 plus 4 plus 7, and you're following the order of operations, you know you're supposed to do these from left to right. Okay? But if they're all addition, since these are all adding, 3 plus 4 plus 7, we can switch the order that we do the operation. We can do 3 plus 4 first, which is 7, and then add the 7 at the end and get 14. Or we can switch the order of the operation by moving and putting parentheses around the back two numbers, the last two numbers. They're around 4 and 7. Look, if you do 4 plus 7 first, you get what, class?
11.
Class? 11. Yeah, you get 11. And then if you add 3, you get 14. So you can do 7 plus 7 and get 14, or you can do 3 plus 11 and get 14. That's the associative property, when you're moving the parentheses. Show me here. Commutative property is where you switch the numbers. Associative property is moving the parentheses. Okay? Let's go on. Here's another example of the associative property of multiplication. 3 times 5 times 2, so these are all times, and you can do 3 times 5 first and get 15, and then multiply by 2 and get 30. Or you could do 5 times 2 first and get 10, and then multiply by 3 and get 30. See, the numbers are in the same order, and that's a key to identifying what property it is. Look for the order of the numbers. If the order of the numbers are switched, this is the commutative property. Repeat. If the numbers are switched, it's the
Commutative property.
right. If the parentheses are switched, then it's the associative property. Associative property. Okay. Now, can you do this with subtraction and division? Can we do 14 minus 2 minus 5 and get the same answer as if we do 5 minus 14 minus 2? No. For subtraction. can't mix the order in subtraction. You can't mix the order in division. You can't do 14 divided by 2 times 3. This is 7 times 3 is 21. Or 14 times 3 first and get, oh wait, I'm sorry. 2 divided by 14, so if we switch the order, we don't get the same answer, do we? 2 divided by 14 is 1/7 times 3. And that's 3/7. So that's different. Okay? Even.
If you did 14 times 2 divided by 2,
That would equal 21. Yep. Yep. And that's switching the parentheses.
Oh.
Okay? Let's go on to some more properties that you need to know. Both of these next properties are called identity properties because when you do the problem, you get the same answer as the number you're starting with. You get the original number. So look, any number plus 0 is that number, right? 10 plus 0 is 10. 40,000 plus 0 is 40,000. That's the identity property of 0. Okay? What is that equivalent to for multiplication? What's the same property in multiplication? What's the identity property in multiplication? In other words, what can you multiply by to get the same number as the number you're starting with? Cool? What can you multiply by to get the same number you're starting with?
1.
By 1. So the multiplication identity property is when you multiply by 1. If you add 0, it's the identity property. If you multiply by 1, it's the identity property. Okay? Also, the 0 property of multiplication is another property. Any number times 0 is 0. 0 to any power is 0. Right? So any number times 0 is 0. And then the last one is called the distributive property. The distributive property is when you have a number outside of parentheses, you can either add these two first and then multiply, or the distributive property says that you can distribute or multiply first, multiply the number by both numbers inside, and then add them together. So we could either do 4 plus 7, which is 11, times 3. What's 11 times 3? Roy?
33.
33. Right? Or we could do 3 times 4, which is 12. 3 times 7, which is 21. And then add them together, and you also get 33. Okay? That's called the distributive property. It's kind of like giving the 3 to each of these numbers. I think of like if you play cards, when you deal out cards, you deal out the same number of cards to each player. This is dealing out the 3s to each of these numbers. 3 4s and 3 7s. Okay? And that's called the what, class? Distributive property of multiplication. Okay? Now, you're going to use these properties and identify these properties in lesson 1-9. Flip the worksheet over. What's the first problem? Problem number 1. Daria.
0 times 75 equals 0.
Yep. 0 times 75 equals 0. What property is that? Ethan, zero property of? No. What are we doing? What operation are we doing? Multiplication. And that's what you have to write. Zero property, and you can write PROPs, of multiplication. You can write that. Zero property of multiplication. Number 2. What's number 2? Roy?
Identitative?
What is the question?
Oh. 15 plus 0 equals 15.
15 plus 0 equals 15. What property is that? Abigail? Identity property of addition. Right, since we're adding, this is the identity. We have to write identity. Property of addition. You can write ADD. Put a period when you write those, okay? Number 3. What's number 3? Lindsay? Okay, they're using letters to stand for numbers. A times B, and I'm going to use a dot here because otherwise it looks like the letter X. A times B is equal to B times A. What's switched? Which property is that? Alex?
Commutative property.
That's the commutative property of
multiplication.
multiplication. You can switch the numbers and get the same answer. So there's some examples for you on how to get these questions correct. Okay? Make sure that you do both things for the second section. Find the value of n, that's finding the answer, and telling the property. Okay? That's your homework for tomorrow.